hear the sounds of your heartbeat. I can hear it now. I can hear it now. I hear the sounds of your heartbeat. I can hear it now. I can hear it now.
All right, so for today's HeartBeat podcast, I've got David Parker, who is the owner and founder of Take Back Alberta. And the reason that I wanted to have David on the show here was for one specific reason is that HeartBeat was actually founded by a conversation that I had with David Parker. What we discussed is that there's a lot of solid Canadian voices, a lot of solid Albertans that are standing up and doing their part and saying their thing, but there's not enough. And so, I was sitting around with the family, the evening, I think either a day after or 2 days after the conversation I'd had with David, and my son was playing the song HeartBeat. It's a song that he'd created. So we're very proud of him in that for his efforts. I love the sound of it, and it just really seemed to kind of mesh with the idea of taking as many people as we can who feel like they don't have a soapbox to stand on, who don't have enough of a platform, or who don't feel like anybody's listening to them, and afford that opportunity. So, David, thanks for taking some time with me here today. And again, thanks for, just helping the conversation to get this whole thing up and running.
Well, and also I'd just like to say thank you to you for actually taking on this project and doing it, because so often in life I have people come to me and tell me, "Oh, David, you need to do this or that to get things over the line." But you're an example of what I think is important, which is when we have a passion for something or a desire to see something done, if we go out and do our part in that, and that was what kind of our conversation was, I think, right, was if we can actually all just start speaking up. And you've been a loud voice for a lot of these things, freedom, for calling government to account, for exposing corruption and falsehood. And so I wanted to thank you for that. But I think if we get more voices, if there were 100 Sheldons, if there were 100 Davids, we would be in a very different position than we are now. And I think that's what you're working on with this project. That is the whole purpose of Take Back Alberta. It's why it exists, to teach people to become leaders, because despite what the media might say, or even a lot of politicians in this province and country, Take Back Alberta isn't about David Parker or even me being a leader. It's about people becoming leaders. And I think you're doing that with this project. So I'm more than happy to be involved and excited to be on this, to have this conversation.
Yeah, and I had a conversation with Sean Newman from the Sean Newman podcast, and it was the same thing. I'm not going to say early on in his podcast, but somewhere he'd invited myself and Marty up north onto one of his shows. And in that same week, I don't know, I'd done 0 podcasts up to that week, and then I'd magically been on 5 of them. It got me a little bit more of a platform, and it kind of got that fire going. So yeah, it's about, taking, one of the phrases that was given to me a long time ago is that a candle that's used to light another loses nothing. And so, in what Sean Newman, and Drew Drew Weatherhead did in having me on their podcasts, and, having a conversation with you has stimulated something like this where I can now start returning the favors. And it's simply amazing. Now,
and it's that ecosystem that really, I think, builds on itself. I mean, look at Sean Newman. When he started his podcast, he was still working his job and he was doing a few episodes. Now he's just doing that full time, because that's the need that exists for what now you and he and Drew and a lot of others are trying to do and accomplishing. And I think like you and Marty are great examples of people who just spoke the truth through a very hard time. And now people follow you because you just kept that as your guiding principle. If we just tell the truth as much as we can, obviously we're all flawed. We're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to say things that we think are true that might not be true. But if our North Star is, I want to just tell the truth as much as I can, I think the more of us that do that, the quicker things will be fixed.
And yeah, I can't agree with you more. And there are a lot of prominent voices. It's I'll take some time just to mention, in alongside of just getting together. Oops. some of the voices that do come together. I got into a conversation with Andy Lee and just said, "Hey, we haven't caught up in a while. We should get together." And she said, "Yeah, let's make this a thing." So I threw it up on Twitter and got a few friends involved, and now it looks like we're going to be having a little bit of a shindig down at the garage on Eau Claire Market, starting at about 5 this Friday, April 5th. And it's just going to be a lot of people that that connect with us, that follow us, a lot of voices that speak up inside of our threads or that help reshare our messages. Because every bit, as much as what we say is important, if nobody's around to hear it, it's of zero value. So, we inside of the thread, I have all these people saying, "Well, I'm really nobody. I don't have a lot of followers and I'm not that active." Don't care. Come down, meet. We don't do what we do for popularity. We do what we do because we have this sense of principle that there's some things going on inside of the province that need to be changed, inside of Canada, inside of the city. And even on that, excuse me, most recently, you were looped into the Recall Gondek as being one of the backers or one of the founders, and a lot of flack had come your way, and you'd made a statement about that when you were down at where was it?
Elections, Alberta. Yeah.
Elections Alberta, stating that you're not a part of that, and knowing some of the people that are involved. I mean, I know you're not a part, but why do you think that they use your name to try and tarnish other groups or to try and tarnish other people? Like, what do you think the big driver is in that?
I think that I'm kind of unlikable as a person, and I don't mean that as to be derogatory towards myself. I think that I am a very independent minded person. I don't like being told what to do. I'm pretty aggressive. Just my nature is very aggressive. I grew up in the knife. I always say politics is a knife fight in a back alley. That's really what politics is, and that's the world that I grew up in. And I'm decently vicious as a person. And I'm working on that. I'm trying to become more loving, more kind. I do believe that that's what my faith teaches me that I need to be, but I'm not good at it. One of the things I like to say is, well, it's not me. It comes from a long history of the Christian tradition, but the church wasn't made for saints. It was made for sinners. And I definitely see myself as someone who has struggled in life with loving my enemies, with being kind to those who persecute me. And so I often fight back, and I'm actually not, I don't think that's totally wrong. I think there's obviously a time to be fighting back. And I think now is one of those times. But because of my personality, and also because of the success that my organization has had through the hard work of many, many people, not just myself, although I probably put more into it than anybody else, because I think that's what leadership is if you want to lead, you have to work harder than everybody else. If you're not, then you're not a leader, you're just the boss. And I believe in being a leader. And there's that old meme of there's the boss sitting on the load being carried by the group saying go forward, and then there's the leader who's at the front of pulling with everybody. And I really believe in that model of leadership. So I think it's three things. The first is that I have an abrasive personality, and anybody in my life that is close to me would tell you that that's the case, family or otherwise. So it makes me easy to be made into a boogeyman. The second thing is I've been very successful in the last 3 years in mobilizing people to make change. And because of that, I'm a threat to let's call it the status quo, whether that's within the United Conservative Party or against the progressive ideology that's taken over a lot of our institutions. So I'm effective, which means I need to be attacked. I am abrasive, which means that I can be created into a more negative image of what the movement is. And then I think the final thing is that I kind of bring it on myself by, going on Twitter and attacking people and ideas that I disagree with. I'm trying to attack people less and ideas more. I'm trying to find that balance. But I think I'm an easy boogeyman to create because we have been effective at Take Back Alberta. but also because of just kind of some of my personality traits.
Yeah, and it's I know we all kind of get branded with the same thing. Oh, you conservatives are this, and you conservatives don't believe in, the like this whole transgender thing that not just the province, but I think, Alberta is the pinnacle province just because of the some of the policy changes that Smith has talked about, some of the legislation that's going to be coming forward. Alberta has been targeted by even up to Justin Trudeau. So, even most recently, on Sunday, where we'd seen Easter Sunday, it was rebranded in a lot of provinces, and I do appreciate that there is some history behind this Trans Visibility Day, where provinces had shut down their Easter celebrations for rebranding into trans what was it?
Transgender Visibility Day, I think, is what they were calling it.
That was exactly it. And when we started to see this after Premier Smith had made her statement in the province, the NDP mobilized really fast in both Edmonton and Calgary and held rallies in downtown squares. And throughout all of the images that I'd seen, it was much the same as the images that I'd seen in all of these other trans visibility things that we'd seen over the weekend, is there was no transvestites that were actually there, which I thought is pretty incredible.
Interesting.
It's like, well, no. If you go through the images back from when Smith made her statement, you go through, we've seen, the NDPs, up on stage having their crying moments. They'd scan through the crowds, and it was about children's rights and trans rights, and the two sects of people that they didn't seem to want to involve in children's rights and trans rights were children or people that are trans. So
Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't seen that, but that makes, I think the other thing is, this is just my theory, and I love your thoughts on it too, but we live in a world without meaning. Like, people have lost their anchor to reality, whether you call that God or culture. Like, I mean, that was kind of Justin Trudeau's whole plan, was to be the first post-nationalist country, like not to have a national identity, but just to be a collection of identities. And that's a very pluralistic way of viewing the world. But the problem with that is that people are longing for belonging, for a place to feel like they're making a difference. And also, because of the history of North America over the last 100 years, one of the ways that people have found identity is fighting for minority rights. Look at the civil rights movement, look at the gay rights movement. These are all movements where people have said, I'm going to fight for the oppressed. And that's a good way of convincing yourself that you're doing something right. Now, in the case of the civil rights movement, I obviously, there was a lot of good that happened out of that. And actually, out of the gay rights movement, I think there was a lot of good that has happened out of that. But the problem with your identity being fighting for the oppressed is you always need an oppressed group to fight for. And I think a lot of people get their identity in this trans movement, thinking that they're fighting for the vulnerable and the oppressed. But my view of it is they're actually doing permanent and irreversible damage to people based on, I would say, a social contagion that teaches people they were born in the wrong body. I don't think there's anything loving about forcing someone to get life-altering surgery and then putting them on drugs for the rest of their life to meet with this idea that they were born in the wrong body. I actually think that's quite evil. And but that doesn't seem to be like, that isn't how people want to view themselves. They want to view themselves as, oh, look, there's this tiny group of people that are oppressed by the majority because they're different, and we need to support them. But it's not good to support people in delusion. It's not good to say, I'm going to affirm your false belief about reality. And that's kind of where we're at right now. And I'm not sure why people have chosen this as the hill they want to die on, because it doesn't make sense to regular people either. Normal people are not hopeful that the people they love are suddenly going to believe they were born in the wrong body. And I'll say this, I don't know the torment, the mental torment that would be. I don't know what it would be like to actually believe something like that. I can only imagine it would be terrible. And so I do feel a level of empathy for people that are experiencing that, but promoting it and encouraging it is not helping these people. I don't think. And I mean, I think the suicide rates of trans identifying people is all the evidence you need that there's a real psychological issue going on there. And I don't think it's the fault of society for not accepting them properly. I think it's because they are trying to mold reality into their beliefs instead of believing in reality.
You know, and I've said something like this, and I continue to say the same thing, is it's not because of, you know, your biological sex, your sexuality, the color of your skin, any of your immutable qualities. That's the reason for your successes. Anything that you achieve throughout the course of your lifetime has absolutely zero to do with any of those characteristics, and it has 100% to do with who you are as a person, and you know what you've set your sights on and what you've been able to accomplish. If you take those achievements and then lend them to another movement, it devalues exactly what you've achieved.
Yeah, well, and look at what Martin Luther King said, right? Is I long for a world where people are judged on the content of their character. That's not how people are being judged in the modern world. They're being judged by things they have no control over, like the color of their skin, like their sexuality, and also like, and I say this all the time, but when did the most interesting thing about a person become who they sleep with? Like, that's weird. That's
And
not the world I want to live in.
and how much better was the world before we actually talked about this?
Way better. Way better.
It's I mean, you know, go back to the locker room days in school and, you know, get past the conversations you had as an adolescent. Um, or bars as, you know, some people grew up, you know, when there was the nights of conquest, there was the nights of, you know, meeting up and hooking up. And I mean, I know that that's all changed inside of the digital era through certain apps and stuff. But at the same token, I mean, you know, nobody's online, nobody's going on LinkedIn and putting beside their name, you know, I went out and met three women, or I went out and met three men. But they will, at the same time, some feel compelled to throw their pronouns into their bio. So I mean, to me, it just seems the most insane thing.
And why is that? Like, if we make things that people can't, and let's Iron Man the trans argument. Let's say that truly there are people. I don't believe this, but let's just say it for the sake of argument. Truly there are people that were born in the wrong body, and they need to like fully realize themselves in the other gender's body, or they need to reform their body to meet their spiritual identity. Let's just say that that's true. Even then, that should not be the most interesting thing about a person, right? The things they care about, the projects they work on, what they're able to create, how they're able to get messages out, all this kind of stuff, the things they accomplish as a person apart from their sexuality or their own spiritual beliefs. Those should be the things that we admire about a person, not their innate right or their innate who they are. And like for me, you know, I'm a white man descended from a bunch of white men, and my whole family is white, and somehow that has been turned into, we can discredit you because of the color of your skin. And I understand that there are many people throughout the world who have been treated that way, have different skin color than I do. But just because that happened to them doesn't mean it's right to do it to others. And yet that seems to be the new methodology by which we're measuring people. And I think the only way that ends is disaster. And I think what's happening with Boeing and other airlines with their diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, and now they're seeing doors fly off planes and bridges are collapsing. And competence is no longer the measure of whether or not you should have a job. It's these facts about yourself that you have no control over. And I think going down that path leads to to well, it leads to communism, frankly.
Well, what it leads to, I don't think is any good place. But yeah, no, I've been a safety officer for a number of years. And, inside of the trades that we worked in, we worked in hospitals, we worked in public buildings, communication systems. It really didn't matter who was working with us or for us. They all had to go through the same training. And if you weren't able to make it through or understand the basic concepts, I couldn't have you on a job site. And we had to have a discussion with project managers and owners of companies about who we could and could not have on site. And I mean, this went down to, whether somebody just wasn't dressing appropriately for being inside of a hospital. It's like, okay, then we need to sit you down. I don't care if you want to go out and have a bunch of beers the night before, you can't show up on site and smell like you had a bunch of beers, because whether you're intoxicated or not, if there's somewhat of the illusion of that, it's not a good safety place, and it's not a good bolstering for our company. And I'd seen some of these conversations stem into even down to racial. I never got fired because I was drunk on the job. I got fired because I was insert whatever here. And it's like, no, I was there. You were fired because of what you did. And it's not because of who you are, the color of your skin, or where you got your education, where you grew up. It's nothing to do with that. It was 100% to do with the fact that you couldn't complete your job in a safe and satisfactory method. And consequently, you were deemed more of a liability to the company than you would be as an asset on the site, and to your workers. Because that's the other thing that we need to keep in mind, is that, when we're in these situations, and especially like an airline door flying off, we want people that are competent in the jobs, because not only can they injure or harm the people that work with them, there's other lives that are going to be a factor in these things. And that's where it can become pretty scary to go over, look past meritocracy and understanding, and go immediately to hiring somebody to fit a diversity quota.
Yeah, and I think this goes even deeper, right? And I don't know, I think this is a very anti-Alberta way of thinking, but it seems to be kind of seeping into culture all across the Western world. But victims have a higher status in our society than anybody else. And so what you kind of end up creating is a mentality in which you want to find the ways in which you're a victim, so you have something to blame for your situation. And I just think that's the antithesis. It's the opposite of what Western civilization is about. If you think of yourself as a victim, no matter what's happened to you, then you're not going to overcome anything, because you're going to have an excuse for why you are the way that you are.
Or that you're celebrating such minor and inconsequential successes, and trying to put yourself that much further that people will just begin to tune out. One, I'm not sure what you see your complex as, but two, your achievements are so minuscule, like they're not worth conversation. So, I'm happy to support you as a person. I'm happy to support you as a neighbor, as a friend. But I'm not going to continue to go through these conversations and listen to, 9 minutes of your victim complex and 1 minute of inconsequential successes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and look at what's happening in Harvard down in the States, right? They had a president that was a diversity, equity, and inclusion hire. And the reason that she claims that people are treating her the way they are is because of her skin color. She immediately goes to that, despite the fact that she's published less academic papers than your average grad student, and it seems has plagiarized many of those papers. But instead of us saying, hey, this is wrong, and it doesn't matter what color your skin is, you shouldn't be the president of Harvard if you're not an accomplished academic, they turn it around to, why do you hate black people? It's the same problem we have in Canada, right? Is we're not building enough houses to be bringing in the number of immigrants that we are. Therefore, the housing prices are getting to the point where my generation cannot afford to buy a dwelling to have a family in, which causes us to have more problems with population because now people in my generation are not reproducing, which means elderly people are not going to have people to support them. However, we think the answer is to bring in 4 times or 5 times more immigrants than we're building homes. It's madness, but if anyone challenges this madness, you're a racist. You don't want other people living here. I don't. My ancestors were all immigrants. And they weren't immigrants from oppressive settler civilizations. They were places like Scotland and Ireland that have been under the hand of the British Empire for hundreds of years. Now, I also have British blood. So, my ancestors oppressed my ancestors. But the funny thing about that is they came here in a very different mentality than the people who are coming here now. They came here to build a better life and do whatever it took to do that. And many of them died doing it. Now we have people coming in that are looking for welfare, people that are looking for the government to take care of them. They're coming here because they heard the government takes care of us. And what's the end result? We have decreased productivity over the last 10 years. We have a smaller GDP per capita than we did 10 years ago. And we have a large welfare state that is hiring people into the public sector, and we're not producing wealth anymore. And that's crushing the next generation. So,
and I think it also has an impact on wages too. And the reason that I say that is when there's, when you have a surplus of workers and you look at the quality of the pool of workers that you have, if it's all inexperienced, you have to appreciate that as things move forward, that you're going to require, let's call it 1 1/4 workers, or you're going to require them for 1 1/4 the amount of time as you would as, a regular candidate to accomplish the same task. So it drives wages down. And then, we go into these situations where, and I have been here before, in the staffing industry, is where, in hiring just basic labor, I can put out an ad on Indeed. I'll get 150 resumes. I'll set up 30 interviews. I'll have 4 people that show up. And if I get 1 guy to the job site the next day, it's exceptional. Like, I'm not the actual stats, but it's phenomenal, the amount of turnover that you have. And, basically as fast as I could print off resumes is I was throwing them through the shredder because they weren't.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you an example from my own life. I am very close with someone who's a heavy duty mechanic, and he works at a significant heavy duty mechanic shop. And he's doing well there, and they are looking for a laborer with no prior experience. And with overtime, that laborer would be making 72 grand a year. Okay. That's what they're offering. Nobody's even applied because people don't want good jobs anymore. They want easy jobs. That's kind of the culture that we've created. They want their leisure, and they want to be able to, and I'm not saying that I'm like totally opposed to this, but they just want to sit around and smoke weed and watch TV and get a paycheck. That's like a lot of people in my generation, or the real curse of my generation is they just want to sit around and play video games and smoke weed, right? Like, men my age play way too many video games. I say this as someone who's loved video games throughout my life, but never had the addiction that a lot of people I have a lot of other addictions I've had to deal with. But we've not raised a culture of hard work. We've raised a culture of entitlement. And that goes back to the victim mentality, is if the things that happen to you are not your fault, but are a result of let's call it an oppressive system, or systemic racism, or whatever you want to call it, systemic, misogyny. So, men are just always oppressing women, whatever you want to call it. If that's how you believe the world works, then you're not going to work hard, because you're not going to believe that hard work can result in something good. But the evidence is entirely on the other side. All of my ancestors that worked hard have done well. Those who didn't work hard have not. And that's how it worked. And
So it's got nothing to do with the color of your skin or your heritage. It has to do with hard work and ethics.
Well, let's talk about color of the skin for a second. I have Irish ancestry, and the Irish had it pretty bad. pretty bad. They were starved to death. They were slaughtered. They were used as slaves when they came over here. They were seen as second-class citizens, particularly in the United States for a long time. Catholics and Irish people in New York and all over the Eastern Seaboard were used as slaves, right? Now, I don't hold that as part of my identity. I actually am proud of what my ancestors have overcome for me to live the life that I'm living right now. And my hope is that I overcome some more things and that my children get to live a better life because of the things that I've overcome. But that's the Western mindset, the good side, let's call it, of the Western mindset. I think we're losing that. And I think that's the most dangerous thing we could ever lose, because that's how you get communism, is once people feel entitled to things and the government promises to give them those things to people, people will support a government that makes those promises, even though governments cannot deliver on those promises. The Soviet Union, communist China, Venezuela, there's an innumerable amount of examples of that government actually isn't the answer and can't be. And yet we still have all of these academics running around claiming that that's just because we haven't done it right yet. You can't do it right because it's a antithetical to reality. It's in opposition to what's real.
And now there is a place that has been created under DEI and under the progressive ideologies that white men can succeed. It just happens to be in women's sports.
Yes, it's true. It's true. And in fact, I would argue that's probably a big reason why a lot of particularly white men are going down that path. It's kind of a get out of jail free card. As soon as you say, well, actually, I'm a woman and I've always been a woman, whether you look like a woman, whether you act like a woman is kind of irrelevant, because that's the new orthodoxy, the new religion, let's call it. You get a high status. And I mean, I would never want to go down that path personally, because it seems so difficult, A, and B, there's an element of it that you're always lying to yourself. Like, it doesn't matter what you tell yourself or what surgeries you get or what medication you take. Your chromosomes aren't going to change. Right?
That's a fact.
And so if you're living, I really believe that living in lies results in cognitive dissonance, which is just torment. It's just anxiety and pain. And I don't know why anyone would want to live that way.
And like, I think I remember where a lot of this started to become a lot more predominant. And I think it was like 10 or 15 years ago, when we were comparing the rates of insurance, like motor vehicle insurance for boys and for girls. And I think it was a under 29 demographic that was mostly being targeted by the higher insurance rates, because that's where they'd notice the most amount of accidents. And however, you could actually change or lower your interest rates by identifying as a woman, having that put onto your driver's license, presenting that to your insurance companies. Now, I don't know how a lot of those cases turned out, but when we incentivize a program like that, you know, if it saves you $300 a year, $500 a year on your car insurance, just to throw out one little, hey, you know what? Call me whatever you want. If it saves me $500 a month, that's fine. I was in I was in the mall, I think it was like last year. I just wanted to go, you know, it's beginning of the school year. I wanted to go pick myself up a set of 501s. I know they're on sale everywhere for back to school. All the stores that I went into, conveniently, not one pair in the size that I wanted. So I end up in the Hudson's Bay. Now, every other store in Market Mall had their Levi's on sale, except the Hudson's Bay. So when I was there, the lady said, well, I can give you the seniors discount. I was like, all right, I'll take it. Now I'm a far enough ways away that you know, even by measures of morality, I should not have taken the discount. But, you know, in seeing that, first off, the Hudson's Bay charged more than any of their competing stores for the exact same pair of pants, and knowing that the discount would only take them to about the same retail as every other store had, It didn't really give me a huge win, but I got the pair of pants, and you know, I didn't have to go through the mall anymore. So win's a win's a win. So I mean, yeah, I'm, you know, incentivizing.
It's an incentive structure. And this goes back to what we were talking about. If in a society your status is dependent on how much of a victim you are, then you're going to be incentivized to highlight how you've been victimized.
Exactly. Now, and we've gone out for breakfast a couple of times. If I went into, you know, if we were sitting in Denny's, you know, having our usual breakfast, and because I've already gotten a senior's discount on a pair of pants, I demanded that Denny's give me the same senior's discount. That's where, you know, we're kind of crossing the Rubicon here, right?
Yeah.
That's
Well,
where I
and think about it this way. This is another way to think about it, I think. Let's say that you're just a pretty normal person. You haven't accomplished very much and you don't really have any status in society. And then one day you realize that you were born in the wrong body and you begin transitioning. And suddenly everybody, not everybody, but many people you're so brave, you're so strong, you're so special. We recognize you, you're visible. Suddenly you matter. Suddenly you're part of something bigger than yourself. There's a whole community around doing this, and there's people online that have become celebrities based on it. Now you have something that you can do that is in your control. Funnily enough, something that doesn't take anything outside of yourself to do, right? Once you decide that, you can act on that. And then suddenly you have status in society. You're special. You're important. That's an incentive in and of itself.
yeah, just simple recognition.
Yeah.
Now you talked a little bit about the Harvard situation. And I think we've seen a little bit of the same situation here inside of Calgary over the weekend as well. And that's when Jody Kondek was at the Flames game and came on the ice and got booed. Now there were a couple of feature pieces that were put out about her, and they attempted to do the same thing. Oh, it's because she's female, or it's because of, you know, the color of her skin is the reason that people don't like her. Instead of talking about the list of egregious policies and complete lunacy inside of city council right now, they decided to talk about the color of her skin, and that's the reason that Flames were booing her off the ice. You know, it's seeing these conversations is we can see exactly where the idea of DEI is going to fail us, and will continue to fail us. We're not going to celebrate you because of the color of your skin. You do a good job, you're going to get promoted. You do a good job, you work hard, you're going to make more money. You change the color, you know, the whatever you have as your disclaimer on your license, um, by your biological sex, if you identify as whatever, if you're going to try and use the color of your skin as a hiring quality, I mean, that's what's going to bring us into a regression of everything that, you know, our ancestors had, you know, moved to this country to try and get away from. We don't.
Yeah, that's the other thing is people call it settlers, right? We've got this whole settler mentality, and it's brought up even more rigorously by the conflict in the Middle East because of the more recent settlement of Israel by the Jewish people, although they have been there for thousands of years. What that really means is just racism, right? Because settlers, quote unquote, built one of the most prosperous and incredible societies on the face of the earth. There's only currently 5.3 million Scottish people, I think, living in Scotland. And there's hundreds of millions of people across the world that have Scottish ancestry, right? That's because you can't really. Scotland became very tyrannical, especially under the British Empire. So much so that that the Americans had to rise up in rebellion to the colony, or the people who were using them as a colony, and create their own country. And acting like just because of the color of someone's skin, they somehow have less of a right to build something new. And in fact, like we did in North America, something that has created more human prosperity than any other civilization in the face of the earth, is to deny history, right? The Romans conquered the United Kingdom 2,000 years ago, and then were driven out by some of my ancestors from Scotland. And then, there were kingdoms, and then the Saxons came and they took over England, and then the Normans came and they took over England. And everybody's ancestors has been enslaved and conquered by somebody else's ancestors. It's just, how far back do you want to go? And in the case of North America, the treatment of the First Nations was not ideal. But in Canada particularly, we didn't just go around slaughtering them and waging some kind of genocidal war. We made treaties with them. Those treaties still exist, and we still try to honor those treaties. Is it a perfect system? Absolutely not. But acting as if it's some historic wrong that is so much further on the spectrum of evil than all of human history, where we have constantly been killing one another, enslaving one another. The problem isn't skin color. The problem isn't even necessarily ideology. The problem is that in the heart of every human being is evil. And I had a great conversation on one of my own podcasts with a fellow named Ellis Ross, who is an elected official in British Columbia, and he's now running for the Conservative Party of Canada there. Really good man. He was a chief of his, I guess it was a reserve at the time, but basically a chief of his people. And they were in poverty, and they were in drug addiction, and it was horrible what was happening to them. And he, through resource development, has helped pull that entire community out of poverty. It's now one of the richest communities in all of British Columbia. He did that using capitalism, an idea that my ancestors came up with in Scotland a long, long time ago. But that idea works because it's not an idea based on culture. It's an idea based on reality, which is the more sovereignty you give individuals over their own lives, the harder they're going to work at building a better life for themselves, and that betterment will spread out to everybody else. And one of the things he told me, and I'll never forget it, it's an old First Nations story. And he said, the way it goes is the elder is sitting around the fire telling a story to his students, and he says, inside you are two wolves, a white wolf and a black wolf, a good wolf and a bad wolf. And the good wolf has things like courage and wisdom and integrity and kindness and generosity. And the bad wolf has anger and greed and malice and resentment and bitterness. And the students, they looked at the elder and they said, which wolf wins? And the elder answered, the one you feed. And I think it's way easier to look at the world and say there's the oppressor and the oppressed. There's the good guys and the bad guys. There's the victims and the victimizers. There's the settlers and the natives, whatever you want to call it. And once you can divide reality into that, you can feel like you're on the good team and other people are on the bad team. We do this in the freedom movement too. There's the government and the people that are tyrants, and there's us, the people, the good people. Nobody's good. Everybody's got evil in their heart. That's one of the clearest and truest teachings of Christianity. It's a teaching of almost all of major religions, is that actually the line between good and evil, and Solzhenitsyn, one of the guys who helped overthrow the Soviet Empire, the line between good and evil runs through your own heart. I know that to be true for myself, and I think it's true for everyone. But it's much easier to create identities that make you feel like you're on the good team and there's a bad team than to address the evil that's in you.
Yeah, and that makes complete sense. And I think that, some of the ideologies that are driven through, having a family, help support, which wolf you're going to feed, so to speak.
Oh yeah, like let's go into that. You're a father and a grandfather. I just became a father not long ago. And one of the most fascinating parts of that for me is I've been a pretty selfish person in my life. It's been a lot of my life's been about David and what I was trying to accomplish. And I do believe there is a virtue to working hard and trying to build something and caring about your accomplishments. There is virtue to that, but there's also a good amount of selfishness in that. But now that I have a son, I'm not even the most important thing to myself, let alone in the world. And that changes you. Once you have things in your life that you care about more than yourself, people in your life that you care about more than yourself, that's gonna feed the good wolf a lot more than it feeds the bad wolf.
Yeah, I mean, sure, you become a little bit more greedy. Maybe you can't afford to give as much to charity, as much of your time, as much of your money. Maybe you can't afford to support your community as much because you're now more turned in circle towards your family. So, maybe it's viewed as somebody, by some as feeding the black wolf in your greed or your lack of charity. But when it comes down to it, your white wolf is being fed because, again, you're no longer the center of your own universe. You now have a much bigger circle inside of your family, and I think that's huge. Now, we've spent a good lot of time talking about what we don't want to see and what we shouldn't be seeing in Canada. So, in your message, that you feed through your community of TBA, Take Back Alberta. What do we want to see, and how do we start to impact those changes? How do we how do we
Yeah.
white wolf our communities?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, right? Because Jordan Peterson kind of came on the scene when I was kind of forming my philosophy of life. Obviously, I was raised in a very Christian home, and that's the foundation of who I am now. But I went through my atheist phase, and I lived like a hedonist. Drank a lot. All the things. Some people call it sowing your wild oats. I call it falling away. But whatever you want to call it, I didn't always follow my Christian beliefs. But Jordan Peterson really helped me come back to that. But he's not even a Christian. But what he taught really changed me, and that's clean your own room. And it sounds so simple and stupid, and people make fun of it. But if you can't begin to work on yourself and take responsibility for why your life is the way that it is and why your society is the way that it is, if you don't say, well, how am I to blame for that? Then you're never going to be able to fix anything, because as long as the problem is outside of you, there's nothing you can do about it. And so what I try to teach people is, a lot of people within the freedom movement, they spend a lot of time talking about how much they don't like the government, and they don't like what the government does, and they don't like politics, and it's all corrupt and it's all bad. And I agree with a lot of those diagnoses, right? We live in a very corrupt society. We live in a society that doesn't take responsibility for when it makes mistakes. Our leaders don't take responsibility. I think Kenny was a great example of that. He always pushed the responsibility onto the bureaucrats, and then the bureaucrats pushed the responsibility back to him. And that's kind of a really good microcosm of how our society works right now. But what I say to people is, actually, your system isn't broken. You are. And that might sound like the opposite of what we need. Is like you said, what's the hopeful stance? How do we fix things? But actually, I think that is the most hopeful thing that a person can hear, because if the problem's outside of you, then there's nothing you can do about it. You're existing in this fatalistic universe that just affects you. But if the problem really is that you're not taking responsibility for your politics, for your society, for your family, for your own well-being, if that's the problem, then that's something people can fix. And I'll give an example from my own life. I've not had the easiest journey necessarily, and when COVID hit, what happened to me was I basically went bankrupt. I didn't go officially bankrupt because my debts were private, but I lost hundreds of thousands of dollars because I was working on a major international trade deal between two countries. And during COVID, the price of transporting goods went up like 4 times. And it just made it economically impossible to do what I was trying to do. And I lost a lot of money. And I despaired. I kind of wanted to give up on life, especially because COVID was making it so that I couldn't even travel or try to fix the problem by doing other business deals because I wasn't even allowed to go on planes or go into restaurants, and my life felt like it was falling apart. And the last day that I was able to get on public transportation, I boarded a plane back to go move into my parents' basement, ostensibly to like a dog does when it's dying, right? To just go back to somewhere safe and comfortable because I didn't have any hope. And I didn't have hope because I hadn't taken responsibility for my own life. I'd been looking for that silver bullet, that big deal that would fix all my problems and get me where I wanted to go. And I've been doing that for a long time. I've been trying to achieve things. I've been trying to reach goals and make the goal my measure of myself. And I remember calling a buddy who'd actually just started a life coaching business and complaining to him that I wasn't even good at doing laundry, right? I'd never really been very good at it. And that there's a whole, but I was like, I can't even do laundry. Like, I'm such a failure. And he said, no, you're not. The problem is that you think laundry should be easy. But laundry is actually like 15 different steps, right? You have to collect the clothes. You have to separate them. You have to put them in. You got to take them out. You got to put certain clothes in so they don't mix with other clothes. It's actually a lot of little steps, but you've never taken the time to learn all those little steps. You just say, I'm bad at laundry. And I realized that I wasn't taking responsibility for my life. I was getting upset at things that happened to me or trying to make things happen. But once I started to take responsibility, my whole life changed. And that's kind of what I've gone around the province trying to teach people is, and it's worked. It really has worked and it will work.
Because it makes sense.
Instead of saying, I don't like that politician, so I'm not going to vote for that party. Politics isn't the weather. Politics is created and managed and maintained by human beings who show up and do things. That's what politics actually is. And what I think, been able to convey to quite a number of people, thousands, maybe even tens of thousands at this point, is actually politics is not this mysterious beast that happens to you. It's not the weather. It's just a bunch of people making decisions that actually ended up just showing up in a room. And people have begun showing up in the room. And by showing up, they've realized actually they can impact things. And I think one of the greatest examples of that is the parental rights policies that Danielle Smith has put forward. The biggest cheer that she got at the annual general meeting last November was on her commitment to supporting parental rights. The people showed up and they made their voices heard, and now we're seeing policy be enacted. Is it a perfect system? Absolutely not. But only about 4,000 people showed up to that meeting. Imagine if there were 10,000. Imagine if people started showing up and actually voting for their school boards. And I'll take responsibility on this. I've never voted in a school board election. I didn't have children. I didn't really care about it. I didn't think about it. I was also homeschooled. I just never really believed in the system. And by neglecting the system and never paying any attention to it and never doing anything in it, which I'm rectifying now in a big way, I am partially, in my own little way, responsible for the state of our education system. If we don't take responsibility for our society and instead spend our time blaming others for the state of our society, it won't get better. It will only get worse. And so I guess the hopeful message, the thing that we should do, the thing that I'm trying to do every day a little bit better, is just take as much responsibility on as you can, period. And people say I'm too busy. I want to be comfortable. But look at you. You didn't need to take on this project of getting people's voices out to the world. Nobody forced you to do it. No one said you had to, but you just took on a little bit more responsibility. You said, I'll take this burden, and what you're probably finding, what I did when I did a podcast, is it's wonderful. It actually brings life meaning and purpose, and it's enjoyable. Responsibility in the modern world is seen as a burden. For example, having children. A lot of people don't want to have children because it's a lot of work. But you and I both know that work is some of the most fulfilling thing, or one of the most fulfilling things you'll ever do in your life. And yeah, is it hard? Oh, yeah. I'm not getting as much sleep as I would like. And sometimes my son wants way more attention than I feel like I can give him. But when he smiles, when I see him learn something, when I know that he knows he's loved and gets to feel that from me and his mom, that's way more fulfilling than smoking, another joint or going out for beers with the boys. Those things don't have a long lasting joy that they give me, apart from perhaps the relationships you get with people while you're doing that. But I think that the answer to our problems is actually if every single one of us, if all of us just took on as much responsibility for the way that the world is as we could and worked to fix as much of it as we could every day, I don't even think we have a tiny fraction of a comprehension of how good this world could be if we did that.
It
And
is
I think
that
that's
journey
the
of
answer.
1,000 miles, though, isn't it? I mean, we have to start taking those first steps. And I see even through just social media profiles where people do take those first steps. They go to, you have an anonymous account that doesn't even have, a name or a picture that's associated. And then they'll subscribe to you. And then they'll start showing thumbs up. And then they'll add in a profile picture, maybe not of them, and then they'll change their names. So it's these little things where people start seeing that, it's one voice that I'm supporting, or it's many voices that I'm supporting, but it's why isn't it my voice? And then they slowly start creeping out. They find their gravity through again other people's in their platforms. And then, you turn it into these, okay, guys, now let's come together and have a meet. It's those journeys that are enjoyable to watch. It's in those journeys that's enjoyable to be a part of. And, again, like not to bring up this whole Friday night meeting, but I know that whoever shows up from wherever they come from, whatever their background, whatever their age group, whatever they look like, whatever they identify as, we do have a diverse group of people that are coming out with us. And again, all of us started off in the same way. We all started off in the exact same platform with the exact same amount of followers, which was 0. Some of us have made, some great leaps and bounds from there. I'm probably one of the least famous guys that's going to be showing up as the headliners. And I'm cool with that because, everybody's not coming together for me. They're not coming together for them. We're coming together for all the people that support us, because without them, again, we don't even have a message. So, that, like I said, that journey, and then taking those others and showing them the way, showing them this is what we did. We're taking our responsibility,
And you can do it too.
and you can do it too.
Right? Yeah.
That's
And
the big
can
thing.
can I add one thing to that? Because I think what you're hitting on is incredibly important. And this goes back to my laundry example, but a better example would be martial arts. So I've gone to the gym a couple times and tried to do Brazilian jiu-jitsu with people, right? Because, I used to think that I was a decent fighter. I've been in lots of, scraps, outside of bars. And, I'm an Albertan kid, fighting is kind of what we do sometimes. And so I thought I was a pretty good fighter because, I could hold my own and, I've got bloodied up, but, I could take a punch and I can give a punch, right? And I like wrestling, all that kind of stuff. And I would get absolutely slaughtered every time I went to the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gym, just by little, like people that were half my weight, just like wrapping their arms around me, just destroying me, right? Pushing my face into the mat. And it's humiliating. And it's like, wow, this sucks. I don't want to keep doing this because I'm not good at it yet. But a thing I've learned from that, and I'm by no means a good fighter at all yet. I have a long, long road ahead of me to be halfway decent. But what I've learned is, and this is something we don't do well in North America, but they do really well in Asia. You have to suck at something in order to get good at it. You have to be bad, and you have to be bad over and over and over again to figure out how to be good. And we have this idea of talent in North America. Well, are you talented at this or are you not talented at that? Who cares? Nobody starts out good at something. And maybe you might have some natural abilities that make you better at something more quickly, but everybody sucks at things when they begin. Look at babies. They suck at everything. They're not good at anything, and they have to learn everything. And yet we act like as adults that's not the case. Okay, so maybe you don't have any followers on social media. I had a buddy, he had 300 followers on Instagram. Nothing. Nobody. And it took him a year of working and he got to 3,000. And then over the course of the last year, he's at 100,000. But that took 2.5 years of grinding, being bad at it over and over and over again to finally become good at it. Me, I had this funny thing where I thought I was good at politics from the very beginning. And I had this huge ego about it. I sucked when I started. I didn't know anything. And the only reason I kept going was because I had this weird ironclad belief that I was good. But then I put in so many hours that I actually did become good. Right. But what I've realized about myself is, and this is the number one thing I want to teach my son, is you have to fail at things in order to get good at them. Failure's not the enemy. Failure's the greatest teacher. And when you learn that, you can do anything. So let's take this to your point about this meetup that you're having on Friday that I'm hoping to come to. Some of those people are going to be like, wow, like, look at what you've built. And it's so amazing how courageous you are. Well, I'm reminded of a conversation I had with Jordan Peterson when I was interviewing him in Red Deer when we had a Take Back Alberta event with him. And I said, how do you have the courage that you do? Like, people want to know, how do you stand up like you do? And he says, I'm not courageous. I'm just more afraid of not doing the right thing. Right. And I think people are going to come up to you and they're say, how do you have the courage to speak the truth? And you say, because I know what lying does to me. Right. Because I know what not telling the truth does. And similarly, I would say, how do you get such a big voice? Well, you just have to speak and speak the truth, and people want it. They're desperate for it. And I love what you're doing with this project, because I think this project is a piece of the answer to what is hurting us. Is if we can get even just hundreds of people to come on and tell their story and realize they do have a voice, what could that end up achieving? I don't even think we're aware of what it could achieve.
Well, and and I say this, and I'm nobody significant inside of the community. I'm not going to bloat my head into thinking that I am. And that's why, I've extended the invite to you and Take Back Alberta and all of your members, that when they want to have their heartbeat heard, all they have to do is reach out to me. This wasn't I mean, I've had some significant voices on here. I've had some really cool people, some great conversations. I've got more in the plans. And then I have other people that I've reached out to who, they come back to me with, well, why would you want me on this? And it's like, you're the exact reason that I need you to be on here. I've seen what you've said. I'm hearing what you're saying. You're not saying anything different than me. You just have a different delivery message. And I don't care if you have 1 follower or 10 followers or 100 followers on Twitter. I don't care if you're not even on Twitter. It's not a Twitter effort. I don't care if you're a paid Substack subscriber, because I never cared about the payment. My information's always going to be 100% free. So it's never going to be, you're never going to get priority in line based on that. Let's have a conversation. If I can get you on, if we can find a timetable that's conducive to both of our schedulings, then I want you to come out. I want you to stand on the soapbox that others have provided for me, my platform, and just have a conversation like you and me are having today.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. I love that you're doing it. And I think that if even just, let's say, 20 people started doing what you're doing and getting more people's voices out, even the fact that you're starting it, you're going to inspire people to do it. Sean Newman's inspired people to start podcasts. We just have to do. And if I have a kind of a life motto that I actually named one of my companies after. It's acta non verba. Actions, not words. And I think it's important, what we're doing here, to be seen as actually it's an action, not just words. Because a conversation is very different than a declaration. And often what we see is people just sending out declarations into the world instead of having conversations. A conversation is an action. It's a building of a relationship. And if we can have a lot more conversations publicly, loudly, with differing viewpoints, I think that's how we fix what's gone on.
That's great. And I know we're hitting at about an hour here, David, so I don't want to take too much of your day away from you. But no, I think those are excellent conversations. I look forward to continuing to work with you in our mutual ideas, in our mutual communities, in supporting you and Take Back Alberta, supporting the members of Take Back Alberta, because I believe that we're all in this for the same thing. Maybe we can call it a little bit greedy, maybe we can call it a little bit selfish, but if we're all in it for a better province, then we're all the benefactors of the efforts that we're putting into this. And so, what's important to me inside of these things is the people that I'm meeting is not that I try and make myself the center of their universe, is that I try to learn as much from them as possible. So I'm getting more active inside of these communities just because people are saying we need bigger voices like yours to show up. And it's like, okay, you know what? I need to do something anyways, because what I'm doing now isn't enough. I'm trying, but in a lot of cases, a lot of days, I feel like I'm spinning my wheels. I just can't get my grasp on how is this going to change things. So when other people loop me into their worlds, when other people lend me their knowledge, it helps me decide, where am I going to be able to help out? What am I going to be able to do? And if all I do is show up and say, you know what, I like the efforts, I like what's going on here, but it's not for me, I don't have to do it. But there's so many other voices that are out there that can involve me inside of their efforts that I'm happy to hear what they all have to say, and happy to share in the triumphs. And yeah, it's not how many times we get hit and knocked down, it's how many more times we're going to get back up after that.
Absolutely. And I think you said we're all working towards a better province. And I think there's a great quote, one of my favorite quotes. It's by a guy named G.K. Chesterton. And it goes like this. Men did not love Rome because she was great. She was great because they loved her. And I think what we often get confused by is we think we can only love things that are already great. And we don't realize that our love for things can make things great.
Value and perceived value. And what I believe is true to me, right?
Yeah.
So we put the value into these things, we make them true to our hearts, and we make them the best that we can possibly make them.
Exactly.
Again, David, thanks a lot for your time, and please do extend the message. I'll be included with the Substacker with the HeartBeat. I'll share some links to Take Back Alberta, to your where to follow you. So you'll share some of that information with me, so I'll others can get looped inside of their communities. I mean, not only am I, I've got a few friends in Calgary, but I'm across Canada, and throughout the province of Alberta. So if there's other people that are interested in taking those steps, if other people have those times, if other people are just tired of seeing what's going on inside of their community and feel helpless and feel like they don't have a voice and feel like they're afraid, then they'll have others to reach out to for their support. And if we can elevate ourselves as a community, then we can work to take back the province, take back the city, and take back Canada in a meaningful way.
And I think it like it really does start with, you got to take responsibility as much as you can. And I just want to thank you for taking as much responsibility as you have, because I know your voice has inspired a lot of people.
Awesome. All right. Well, enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
I hear the sounds of your heartbeat. I can hear it now. I can hear